What's going on, horror gang? Welcome to I Shot Him 6 Times YouTube horror movie channel. As you know, I'm your host Marcus. Please be sure to shoot that like button, subscribe to the channel, as well as hit that notification icon so you get all the latest content updates to the channel. In this video, I'm going to take a trip back to Scream 5 and talk about did Dewey Riley hide the fact that Stu Macher is alive, and how this theory could have a leg to stand on. But before I do that, let's hit that intro. I shot him 6 times. Okay, everyone, Dewey Riley, the lovable, iconic deputy turned sheriff in the Scream franchise, portrayed by David Arquette, as we all know, finally met his demise in the Scream requel that came out in January of this year, much to the dismay of many, if not all, Scream fans, after surviving the 4 previous films. His cat-like knack for living, as he had been stabbed a total of 9 times by multiple Ghostface killers, came to an abrupt end in the hospital scene that everybody knew was coming thanks to the over-excessive detail put in the movie's trailer. However, in the scene where we see Dewey call Cindy to let her know Ghostface is back, he proceeds to tell her this feels different in reference to Ghostface returning. That line has stuck with me since that moment. I heard it, and leads me to believe that when Dewey died, he took a very personal, important, and volatile secret to the grave, and leads me to this question. Did Dewey know that Stu Macher was alive all along and took this secret to the grave? Now, I know a lot of you, if not all, would question if Dewey did know about Stu surviving the events of Scream 1996, why would he keep this a secret from Sidney and Gale? Well, it's actually a lot more simpler than you may think, as Dewey didn't tell them because he wasn't allowed to. How was he not allowed to, you may ask? Well, let's first go with the premise that Stu is still actually alive. As I've stated in previous videos, Stu's family had the financial support to seal his records, which is why media outlets never reported him as still alive because they weren't notified because of his records being sealed for public knowledge. And keep in mind, this isn't uncommon in horror movies or the Scream franchise in itself, as in Halloween H2O, Laurie Strode faked her death, and the only one who had her file was Nurse Marion until Michael broke in and found it in Nurse Marion's house, which is how he found out that Laurie was still alive and living in California. It's safe to say Laurie had her file sealed to the public eye, and much like Stu's parents, the Strodes had the money to pay for her file to be sealed from the public eye. And though Sidney Prescott didn't fake her death in Scream 3, she did change her name and move to a secluded area where no one could find her, and it was clear no one outside of her close friends and confidants knew where she was. You even hear Tom Prince, who portrayed Dewey in Stab, say whatever happened to the real Sidney Prescott? Who knows, she's probably living off in the fucking universe somewhere, man. So that alone tells me that the media didn't even know where Cindy was. Because if they did know where Cindy was, when Cotton was murdered, they would have been flooding her door with questions. And as we also know, Sidney's dad had money as well. So being the media especially didn't know where Sidney was, I think it's safe to say they had her record sealed as well. This notion can also learn to be true when an anonymous caller asked for Sid's file for research, which we know the boy said no to because Dewey explains that story to Gale and says he removed her file right before the file room was ransacked back in Woodsboro Police Station. Back to Dewey. If Dewey did know Stu was alive, he wouldn't be allowed to tell Sidney or Gale as part of the deal made to conceal Stu's records. As I'd like to think the entire police department, especially Dewey, being he was not only stabbed but was the officer at the scene of the crime, made them all sign non-disclosure agreements, meaning that Dewey legally would not be allowed to disclose information about Stu Macher being alive, as it would jeopardize his career in the police force. So what does the line, "This feels different" by Dewey in Scream 5 mean, if it means anything at all? Did Dewey have a feeling that Stu somehow could be involved in these new attacks, which could be why he feels these attacks are different from the others? We don't know, and only time will tell, especially if it is revealed Stu Macher is alive. If my theory turns out to be true, you may also ask yourself, why didn't Dewey tell Gale and Sidney about Stu being alive after he retired from being a cop? Just because he isn't a cop anymore doesn't mean that the non-disclosure agreement isn't still intact, as if he were to release information on Stu, he could be subject to a lawsuit for breach of that agreement. Alright everyone, that is it for this video. Hit the comment section below and let me know what y'all think about this theory. Do you believe that if it is revealed Stu Macher is alive in Scream 6 or 7, do you believe it will also be revealed that Dewey knew about him being alive all along? Or do you think that the "this feels different" line means nothing, and that even if Stu is revealed alive, Dewey, like everyone else, had no clue about Stu being alive? Once again, this is I Shot Him 6 Times YouTube horror movie channel. I'm your host, Marcus. Please be sure to shoot that like button, subscribe to the channel, as well as hit the bell icon to get all the latest content updates to the channel. Join this wonderful community we got growing here on YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and Instagram. Thank you for watching.